Round 4 of the Pecking Order Show, we'll be talking about 3 things. I said 3 things. That's better. Firstly, we'll be recapping games from the weekend. Secondly, we'll be taking a look at how accurate the TPO predictions are. And thirdly, we'll be having a look at the games for the upcoming weekend. Hello and welcome to round 4 of the Pecking Order Show, a show where we talk about the struggle for supremacy in Australian football, everything from the serious to the ridiculous. As always, I've got Jake here joining me on Skype to help me explain things I don't understand, which is most of it. Jake, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Cody. I've been looking forward to this all day.
Have you? Really?
Yeah, good to go.
Cool.
It's a slow day at work.
Awesome. Well, in round 4 of the Pecking Order Show, we'll be recapping the weekend's results. We'll be having a look at how accurate the Pecking Order rankings and predictions are. And thirdly, we'll be looking at the upcoming games for the weekend. By the way, guys, I don't think we've mentioned this before, but we'll be doing a show every single week until the end of the winter footballing season. So basically running right through to September for a total of around 30 shows. So got a long way to go, and we'd love to hear your feedback. We've been getting some good feedback, both positive and some negative stuff as well, but we can take it. Well, I can, not sure about Jake, but it's always good to receive some feedback. So please let us know in the comments section below what you'd like to see more of, maybe less of. If you don't want to see Jake at all, let me know. But
that's not an option.
That's not an option. We need him here to explain the nitty gritty. And also, guys, thanks to everyone who signed up to our email list to receive the TPO Weekly Roundup PDF that's sent out every Wednesday morning. So you'll be watching this Wednesday night or Thursday. If you've signed up and haven't received it yet, maybe just let us know in the comment section below. I'm not sure what would have been going on there. And for anyone who does want to get a copy, we'll be sending it out, as I said, every single week. Just go to our Facebook page, TPO Rankings. On the left-hand menu, you'll see the email sign-up text. Throw your email in there and you'll be good to go. All right, on to our main topic today. So our main topic is we're basically challenging ourselves on behalf of you, the viewers, and asking the question, how accurate are the TPO rankings? How good are we at predicting results? And on that theme, before we sort of get into that nitty gritty, because Jake's got some explaining to do, I'm going to introduce a quick little section into our recap every week. And I haven't actually run this by Jake. So Jake, I hope you're cool with this.
I'm not sure yet. Keep going.
Hold your judgment. Well, basically our system predicts a winner for every game. So we want to see how many games we get right each week, but we also want to see how you, the viewers, how many games you can get right each week in predicting. So I'm just basically every Wednesday going to throw up the games that we preview for the upcoming weekend. There's usually about 4, 5 or 6 games, and say, who do you think will win in the Instagram stories? So basically you just need to vote who you think will win, the Team A, Team B, whatever it is. So for example, this weekend, I know one of my games that I'm picked out is Sydney United versus Blacktown City. So you'd see that on the Instagram story, a little poll, you'd pick who'd win. And basically want to see if there's someone out there who can get all the 4 or 5 or 6 games correct. Basically, we'll give you a shout out maybe on the following week, depending how many people there are that get it right. And we might even look at keeping a running sort of leaderboard. Now, Instagram stories only allows 2 options, so there's no draw, unfortunately. There's only Team A or Team B. So if there is a draw, we'll just sort of scrap that. But we'll see how things go. It's a bit of an experiment. And remember, guys, Instagram stories only sticks around for 24 hours. So I'll be popping it up at around 5 p.m. on a Wednesday, Queensland time, and that'll run through to about the Thursday, 5 p.m. So you need to get your votes in by then, just for a bit of fun anyway. So remember, our name on Instagram is TPO Rankings, exactly the same way spelt as on Facebook. Okay, into our recap, Jake. Lions versus Western Pride up here in the Queensland NPL. Western Pride got up 1-0. Have we seen any changes to the rankings?
Pride, I guess, with their win, and they were probably slight favourites in this one, but it was a close game. So they picked up some TPO points. They didn't actually move in the rankings, though, because there's still a little bit of a gap between them and the next club. So they're sitting in 31st at the moment, but gaining ground, I guess, on those in front of them. On the other hand, Lions fell a few spots. I think they're in a pretty tight group of clubs around them in terms of the points. So they've dropped down to about 43rd after that loss.
Yeah, okay, cool. And another game we had previewed was Bentleigh Greens, who are the TPOC holders there down in Victoria, versus Pascoe Vale. What was the result there, and what impact on the rankings?
So Bentleigh Greens held their TPOC title for another week. They had a win over Pascoe Vale 2-0. So they've essentially, at the moment anyway, they were going into the game the second highest ranked non-A-League club, or club outside the A-League, and they've solidified that spot now. Mm-hmm. So on the rankings, that is. And they're actually gaining ground on Central Coast Mariners, who are the club closest to them in front. So as we know from previous weeks, Heidelberg are actually ranked higher than Central Coast, and Bentleigh Greens are actually getting close-ish. If results keep going that way, maybe in the next couple of weeks we could see them overtake them as well. But on the other hand, Pascoe Vale dropped down to 23rd in the rankings, so they're still highly ranked, but just holding on to that top 25 spot.
Yeah, and as we see, a good win or a good couple of wins or losses the other way, you can start dropping up and down the table pretty quick, especially as you say, there's some clubs that are really close. And I think actually, it's a bit later, we'll get into it. But so we'll move on to the next game, which we previewed, Manly versus APIA Leichhardt. APIA taking this one out 2-1, and I think they've jumped up a spot.
Yeah, so APIA are up to 14th on the rankings, and they've, I guess, moved up ahead of South Melbourne, I think it was, who were in 14th. And Manly didn't drop any, or they dropped some points, but didn't drop anywhere on the rankings, so they're in 17th still. Still, I guess, favourites for at least making the finals, Manly, but APIA now kind of pushing for one of the favourites for the title with that win.
Yeah, sure.
Obviously early days, so just to obviously clarify that, we're talking about the end of season predictions based on rankings, so they're up there.
Which you can see in the weekly roundup PDF, guys, that Jake's going to be putting together. And the fourth game here we had previewed was Gold Coast United versus Olympic FC in the Queensland NPL. I believe it was a 2-2 result, Jake?
Yeah, so this was one of the ones I picked as a game of the week because I'm following Olympic. I was following Olympic after 5 wins from 5. This is the first game they dropped points against Gold Coast, but still undefeated and still the TPOC title holder in Queensland. So they're, I guess they were favourites to win this game against Gold Coast. So because they didn't, they actually dropped a few TPO points. They're still up there. They're ranked 36th in the country, and Gold Coast is just inside the top 100 with the draw that they got, which again was unexpected. So I think they're about 97th after that game.
Yep. And we've only sort of touched on 8 clubs around the country there. Or 9 or 10, including some of those A-League clubs we mentioned earlier. But is there any other sort of noticeable movements up or down the table in the rankings?
There's one, and I guess there's a lot of things that are interesting. There's 200 clubs, so there's plenty of movement that's worth looking at. But there's one in particular that's worth mentioning, and it came about because of 2 results. So Heidelberg had a 1-0 win against Dandenong Thunder away from home, and then so that was the first. The second one was Wellington losing to Western Sydney in the A-League 4-1. So, long story short, what's happened is Wellington have moved or dropped points on the TPO rankings. Heidelberg have picked up points, and the end result is that Heidelberg's actually ranked now above Wellington. So they were already above Central Coast. They're now ranked higher than Wellington as well. So they're up to 9th. So 9th highest ranked club in the country right now.
Yeah, awesome. I think a couple of weeks ago I accidentally said they were ranked 9th by mistake instead of 10th, so I was just predicting a few weeks early.
Yep.
Yeah,
there you go.
Okay, all right, on to our next segment. So how accurate are we? How accurate are the TPO rankings and the predictions? So Jake, let me play the role of the viewer who wants to know more about the predictions and maybe challenge the TPO ranking system that you put together. Let's start with the predictions. Each week you send me the numbers and I have no idea how you calculate them. Maybe you can just explain yourself a little bit.
Sure. And I guess part of this, we probably mistakenly interchanged the word prediction and probability a little bit, which is probably a little bit unintentional. But essentially when we put out our probabilities of who's going to win, we break it down and say Team A might have a 40% probability of winning and Team B at 30 and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what we're talking about, as opposed to a prediction like Team A is going to win 2-1, that sort of thing. But anyway, I guess to start with, I'll try and defend myself personally a little bit as to why I might be qualified to do these rankings, and I'm not going to do a very good job of it, because the short and probably unsatisfying answer for some people is that I'm not at all qualified. So I'm not a trained or qualified statistician or anything like that. And probably the best I can offer is that I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes, or geek out over some Excel spreadsheets and formulas and doing cool things like that. So that's about as good as it gets.
Do you just use cool and Excel spreadsheets in the same sentence?
Yeah, look, those that understand what I'm saying will get it, but most won't. So I think it's cool. Anyway, I guess the only real defence for Cody and I, though, is that we're football fans. We love watching, supporting football, and at the end of the day, it's one of those things. Nobody else had done it, and a ranking system for every club in Australia, and unifying, I guess, or being able to compare those clubs is something that had to be done, and we're the ones that have picked up that mantle for now. So I guess moving on from that, though, if you're not satisfied with our credentials themselves, what we can do is actually test, though, what the rankings or the rankings themselves say. So we can essentially go and look at the rankings of 200 clubs and the order that they're in, and we can take those rankings and use them to, as we said before, spit out some probabilities for games and see what the actual results are and compare the two over a period of time. So what that does is it gives us a bit of an indication, well, here's a group of games that we predicted to have X result, and the actual result was something different or the same, or on average comes out about the same. So it just is a way of testing it. So what we'll try and do is get a graph up that'll help us hopefully show this. There's probably a bit going on, as most of my graphs that we put up on this show probably need a little bit of explanation, but hopefully I can talk through it. So what we do is, just to step back a little bit, our database at the moment, in terms of how many games we've covered or go into the system, goes back to 2005 at the moment. More or expansion coming in the future, but for now it goes back to 2005, and there's about 20,000 games in that database. So there's a lot that we can kind of look at and get some good data out of. So as I said, we'll get this image up and let me explain what we're looking at. So essentially what we've got is along the bottom axis there, the x-axis, we've got the predicted win percentage, TPO predicted win. So what that's saying is what percentage probability we give the home team of winning a particular game, and we'll do that for every game. Along the side axis, the y-axis there, is the actual win percentage. So the straight line that we've drawn through there is where they line up, and if we were perfectly accurate at predicting results, all of those blue dots would be perfectly aligned or put on that line. Now, if that were the case, we'd probably be making millions of dollars with betting and all the rest of it. There's no system that I know of in the world that would do that perfectly, but what we're trying to do is get as close to that line as possible. So to give a bit of an example, just in case it doesn't quite make sense, if we look along the bottom and we'll pick one, say 40%, so what that means is we've picked a range of games and we've said that the home team has a 40% chance of winning that game. So if we go up and find the dot that lines up with that and then go across to the side axis, we can see, well, what actually happened in all of those games. And in this case, out of those 20,000 games that I was talking about before, there's been about 200 of those where we've, and when I say we, it comes straight out of Excel. I'm not doing this individually, but there's been about 200 games where the home team was predicted or had a probability of 40%, and out of those 200 games, 41% of the time they actually did win. So that's actually a good result. We predicted 40% of the time they'd win. They actually won 41%. So what we're trying to do is get them to line up. That kind of makes sense, Cody. I'm probably rambling, but hopefully you're with me.
Yeah, so far so good.
So far so good. And you can do that along all of the points along the bottom of the graph, but that's just one to show how it works. So as I said, we're trying to get those dots to be as close to the line as possible, and it's not perfect. There's there's some unders and overs, but I guess across the board there we're pretty close. So I guess if you were to sum it up in a way, what we're saying is that we're looking at a very large range of number of games, so a pretty big data set. And on average, we're coming out pretty close. What it doesn't tell us is if you look at one individual game, so, we pick out one specifically, all we're talking about is probabilities. So, anything can happen in any game. So it's one of those things across a period of time and across a large range of games and clubs will come out about right. But individually, it's not always quite going to get it. And I guess when I think about that, that's true for the rankings as well. So, we've got 200 clubs that we've put in a specific order, and we're saying that this is how they're ranked. And overall, these results that are showing in the graph here say that we're pretty close. But no doubt people will look at that and be able to find one specific club here or there that maybe should be ranked higher or lower. So overall, we're pretty good and we're pretty happy with it. But I'm sure that, say a fan of a particular club might have some small issues. But we're here to have a bit of fun and create discussion. So if that's the worst that comes out of it, then we're pretty happy.
Yeah, that's it. I guess it's hard because there's nothing really to compare it to. You've got the TPO rankings and the predictions or probabilities, and you've got the actual results. There's no other system, no other person, no other group of people out there putting out anything comparable where we can go and, I suppose, test how accurate we are against that sort of system, is there?
No, nothing that covers all of the clubs that we're looking at, and especially when we get to the point of expanding it to more clubs. There's a couple of people out there that are looking at the A-League only or something like that doesn't go quite as far. But what we can really do is look at FFA Cup games and those games where you've got clubs that don't usually play each other, and that helps give an indication of we're comparing clubs that have never played each other before, but you can kind of interpret a little bit from some of those results.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, as we sort of said at the start, guys, if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments, and I'm sure Jake would love to sort of clarify anything you guys have got questions for. Anything else to add, Jake, or ready to move on?
Let's just sum it up for those that are totally confused. We're doing a pretty good job and we're happy. It can always be better. Cool,
perfect. All right, with that's sort of segment 2 out of the way. Let's move on to the third and final segment of this week's show, and that's the coming weekend's games. I think we've got 3 each, Jake.
We do, yes.
Yep. So I'm gonna get things started with a game in the first round of the Tasmanian NPL. So we got Hobart Zebras versus South Hobart. It's a teapot game, so South Hobart are the pecking order champions of Tasmania at the moment. And they've actually held it for 15 continuous games, by far the longest run of any state at the moment. There is 66% chance of winning that game away from home, I believe. So South Hobart are currently 39th on the rankings and Hobart Zebras 92nd. Jake, what's your first game?
I have 3 games, but I've got 2 honourable mentions that I won't spend time on, other than to say I'll be watching the results. And the first one is Peninsula Power versus Wide Bay Buccaneers in the Football Queensland Premier League. Looking at the score there in particular. And the second one is... I said I wasn't going to spend time on this, Cody, but anyway, now you've asked me, I have to...
you can't just say it and not explain it.
Yeah, I guess so. So Peninsula Power, very strong start to the season, predicted to win that league. At the moment, it's looking like they've got a bit of a gap. Wide Bay at the other end, predicted to come nearly last and have copped a lot of goals so far. So
and that's where we're from too. We used to play for Wide Bay.
Yes, so I'm hopeful that it's not a complete blowout, but you could be looking at one of those big score lines again.
Yeah.
And then the second one is Bayswater City versus Inglewood in the WA NPL, and that's because Bayswater being the teapot holder and Inglewood predicted to finish high as well. So it's just looking like a pretty competitive game. But if we get into the first one that I've picked out as one of my 3, it's in the Northern New South Wales NPL, which also starts this weekend. And it's Lambton Jaffas against Edgeworth Eagles. And it's a grand final replay. So last year, Edgeworth finished as the premiers on top of the table, and Lambton Jaffas ended up beating them in the grand final. So they're the reigning champions. So It's a big one to start it off, and they're predicted to finish second and third in that league at the moment. So, and they've both, for those that watch the FFA Cup will know those names because the Edgeworth have been there a couple of times, Lambton and Jaffas, I think, once. So, should be a good one.
Cool. All right. Well, on to my second game, and it's Sydney United versus Blacktown City in the New South Wales NPL. Sydney United ranked 18th, Blacktown City 13th. Some very highly ranked teams here at the moment. Blacktown City are the pecking order championship holders of New South Wales. And I've got down here, they're sort of less than one TPO point, and when you consider they're on over 2,100 points, they're less than 1 point above APIA or APIA Leichhardt Tigers, so very close there with the other New South Wales NPL team. So I guess a loss here again to Sydney United and a win to APIA could see them swap spots or even possibly more. They started their season with a 0-0 draw against Wollongong Wolves, while Sydney United went down to Marconi Stallions 1-0. I think Blacktown are after it's only one round, as we say, but predicted to finish second on the ladder. Sydney United predicted fourth, so it should be a really good game. And Jake, what is your second/fourth game?
My second game, coincidentally, is Sydney United against Blacktown City. So for those watching, Cody and I do this separately and bring it together. So this is our only crossover of the week. But for all the reasons you've just mentioned, I've picked the same game, so I don't really have much more to add to that.
Cool.
Should be
I
did
a pretty good. I did a pretty good job, didn't I?
You did. You've hit all of my talking points. So I'll give you that one.
Oh, will you continue? You finish off your third game.
All right. So my third one is from the Queensland NPL, and it's Western Pride against Moreton Bay. Now, we mentioned it before, Western Pride had a good win in what's, I guess, sort of considered the local derby against Lions, and they could become the highest ranked club in Queensland if things go their way, so they're not far behind Brisbane Strikers, who are currently the highest ranked. And it's also, like my first game of the week, this is also another grand final replay, so these two teams met in the 2017 grand final, and Western Pride got a win in that one.
Yep.
And Western Pride, as we sit right now, are predicted to actually win the Queensland NPL. So
yeah, wow.
Moreton Bay predicted to finish third, and one of the few teams up there that'll potentially challenge them. So I'm hoping actually to get out and watch this one live as well.
Yeah, great. Is that on Saturday or Sunday? I
think that one's on Saturday.
Saturday. Yeah, cool. Yep. You're not going to make the trip up and watch your brother play?
I thought about it. No, I didn't even think about it.
Fair enough. All right, on to my last game, which is Oakleigh Cannons versus Heidelberg. So, yeah, as we mentioned earlier in the show, Heidelberg up to 9th on the rankings above Central Coast Mariners and Wellington Phoenix. Oakleigh Cannons 19th. What have we got here? So, Oakleigh, coming off a 4-1 win over South Melbourne. Very impressive win there. I think they've jumped up 2 spots to 19th. Oakleigh at home. Heidelberg only sort of just beating Dandenong Thunder 1-0, who I think went down like 9-0 the week before to South Melbourne. Am I talking correctly here, Jake? I think that was the case anyway. So I think they would have expected better. So 1-0. I mean, they still got the 3 points, but yeah, should be a good game. Heidelberg sort of strong favourites there with 54.5% chance of winning, of our probabilities there. So should be a good one. Any other games there, Jake? Or you've kind of touched on enough, haven't you?
I've probably talked enough, and to be honest, that Oakleigh Cannons Heidelberg was one that just didn't quite make mine, but it's one that I'll be watching as well. Just for no other reason than to see how long Heidelberg can sit above those A-League clubs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess now we're seeing pretty much all the leagues around the country kicking off. It's going to be plenty more games and exciting games to watch. And my Football 24 app's going to be one of the most frequently visited apps these days.
Yep, me too. And after this weekend, as I say, Tasmania and Northern New South Wales kicking off. Yep. I think I'll double check the dates, but we're not far from the ACT and then second division in Western Australia and Northern Territory, which I haven't actually seen the fixture list for that one. So if anybody can point me in the direction, I'll keep an eye out as well. But cool. That one will kick off at some point as well.
Fantastic. Well, that's round 4 of the Pecking Order Show. Guys, remember to check out our Instagram stories Wednesday, Thursday. Get your votes on. That'll be something fun to do. Jake, thanks again for joining me.
Not a problem. Thanks, Cody.
Cool. And thanks to everyone for watching, and we'll see you all next Wednesday.
Bye.